Hey, so hi guys, my name is Guok Da Feng. I'm a third year computer science student. So this is going to be a Python workshop, about half an hour or so, and then we're gonna have 10 to 20 minutes at the end for questions. So this workshop is ideal for people who want to learn Python for the first time, or they are taking ITI 1120. So the table of contents, as you can see on the left, we're going to cover everything up until loops, and if we have time, we'll do the Fibonacci sequence and selection sort. So for questions, if you guys have questions, just feel free to turn on your mic and ask me, or email me in this address, and to also get the code presented in this workshop. Also, I've also taken these courses, so if you guys have any questions, you guys can also ask me about it. Today, if you don't have Python already installed on your computer, you can go to this link here. I'm gonna paste this in the chat, but this link will allow you to run Python code on the internet. So like print hello world, we can print out and do a lot of stuff. Okay, so let's begin with the first lesson, which is the print statement. So if you want to print out something on the screen, you can just use the print statement. It's very simple. And let's say we want to print out hello world. The way to write a comment in Python is to put a hashtag symbol and write this is a comment, or write something to explain what you're trying to do in the code. Because sometimes your code can be very long and you need to explain it so the next person working on the code knows what this is going to do. For multi-line comment, you need to use the triple single quotes. And then you can write multi-line comments. You no longer need to put the hashtag symbol in front. So as you guys are getting set up, I'm going to paste the code in the chat. And you guys try it on your end. I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds. Okay, moving on to the next lesson. So how to get the input from the user. So let's say you want someone to enter in their username and password. Then you need to use the input function. So let's say we have a variable called username, and we're going to input and then enter your username. And afterwards, we're going to print out you entered along with your username here. So let's go ahead and run this code. So the way to run it is to use the terminal. But if you use the online IDE, you can just hit the run button. Enter your username. And as you can see, it prints out you entered this. Okay, go ahead and try it on your end, and I'm gonna give you guys 10 seconds. Now, how do you work with numbers in Python? Well, it is very simple. You can do plus, minus, multiply, divide, like normally, but the multiplication symbol is an asterisk in Python. And no, you also cannot divide by 0, or else your program would crash. So one thing to notice here is, let's say you take 11, you divide by 5, right? And you want to get the quotient. So the quotient would be 2, and the remainder would be 1. So if you want to get the quotient, you need to use the double slash. If you want to get the remainder, you use the percent sign. So this is something that's good to know. And for exponential, you use double asterisks. So 2 to the power of 3 should give you 8. Let's go ahead and run it. Yep, so this should be your output. And I've pasted the code in the chat so you guys can try out on your end. And we'll go to the next lesson in about 10 seconds. If statements. So in Python, you can use something called if statements if you have multiple conditions. And in this case, you do this, or in that case, you do that. So a classic example is age, right? So let's say you ask the user for their age, you use the input function, and this float you put in front just basically means you want to get a number from them. And then afterwards, we're going to say you entered and we print out their age. Now, if their age is more than 18, then we're going to say you're older than 18. But else, if it's not 18, it's less than 18, then we're going to print out you are under 18. So let's say we enter 19. It's going to say you are older than 18, and that's correct. Let's try again. Let's say 5, and it's going to say you are under 18. But what if we put something invalid? Let's say below 0, like this, -3. Well, it's still going to say you are under 18, and that's not really correct, right? You can't have an age that's below 0. So how to fix this? The way to fix this is to include else if. And basically, it's the same example, but here we say if you're older than 18, then we're going to print out you are older than 18. If the age is between 0 and 18, we're going to say you are under 18, but else it's invalid, right? So here we enter in the age, let's say -2 or -3, and it's gonna say invalid age. And actually, instead of float, I would say integer because we want to get an integer. I put the code in the chat so you guys can try. Boolean values and while loops. So Boolean is just a variable that's either true or false, and a while loop is just something that runs and repeats itself as long as a condition is true. So for example, let's say you have a game, right? You have a Boolean value playing, and while playing is true, then we're going to do whatever is inside this while loop. So we're going to have the game starts, and then the game finished, and then we ask the user, do you want to play again, either yes or no? And if the user says no, then we say thank you for playing, and then we set playing to false. And when we do this, it's going to terminate because playing is no longer true. Here it says while playing is true, but when playing is false, it's no longer going to do this, and the program will end. So the game starts, the game finish, you want to play again, let's say yes. Okay, now yes. And what if the user enters in something invalid? It's just gonna assume that they want to play again until they enter no. And then it's gonna say thanks for playing. So go ahead and try this on your end. Okay, let's move on to for loops. So for loops are very similar to while loops because they repeat something over and over. But the difference is that a for loop, you can repeat something up to a certain number of times. So let's say you want to print out a number from 1 to n, and n can be like 50 or 100. So you would do a for loop for I in this range from 1 until n inclusively. So this means from 1 to n inclusively, but in Python you just +1 at the end. That's just the way it works. But this means from 1 to n inclusively, and then you would print out the I variable. So you want to print from 1 to n, let's say n is 50. And as you can see, it prints from 1 to 50. How about you want to plus from 1, 2, 3 until n? You want to add all of these together. Well, the idea is the same. You use a for loop. So first we're going to set the total. The total variable is equal to 0. And then we're going to do a for loop from I in range from 1 until n inclusively. We're going to add that I into the total. So basically, total is 0, and then it's going to be 1, then 1 plus 2 is 3, and 3 plus 4 is 7, and so on, right? And at the end, let's say you plus 1 until 100, you should get 5050. So adding 1 to n, let's say n is 100, it's going to print out 5050. Now, another way to do it is to just use the summation formula, which is n times n plus 1 divided by 2. And this would actually be faster than the for loop way. But sometimes it's actually very difficult to come up with formulas like these. But most of the time, I would just use the for loop. Oops, let's run this program again. And you want to add from 1 to 100. Yeah, so as you can see, it also prints out 5050. Strings. So strings are basically names and words. It can also be a sentence. So for example, we have a string s, it's a variable s, and we have a sentence here called Python is too easy, right? I think it's really easy because it's very similar to English. And up here we have indexes. So indexes are locations. So at location 0 or at index 0, we have the letter P. At index 1, we have Y. So these are just locations. Now let's say you want to get P. That would be S at index 0. So that's the way you do it. How about getting the word Python? Well, you start at 0. So starting at 0, and you get everything up until 6. Or rather, everything before 6. So starting at 0, you get everything before 6. And that would be Python. To reverse a string, you just do double colon -1. That's the syntax for it. Now, lastly, if you want to convert Python is too easy to uppercase, and then you also change a letter until I, right? The first thing you do is you use the upper function. And then you subtract, or you get everything from the beginning until the P. So that would be starting at 0, you get everything before 1. So starting at 0, you get everything before 1, and that would be P. And then plus I, so now you have this part, and then you plus the rest. The rest, starting at index 2 until the end. And that's the way you do it, 2 colon, and that's it. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, I mistyped Python. Yep, so we have P and Python, and then reverse, and then this is what we want. Well, what about lists in Python? Well, it's very similar to a shopping list. You have an apple, banana, and citrus, and the syntax for the list is you have brackets like this. So similar to strings, the first location is 0, the second is 1, and the third is 2. Let's say you want to print out 1, 2, 3, and apple, banana, citrus. So there are 2 ways to do this. You can use a for each loop or a for loop. So for the for each loop, you set number equal to 1. Then for each item in the shopping list, we're going to print out that number and then the period for this one. And then we have the item. And then we increment the number 1. So the next time it's 2 and 3, right? The second way is to use a for loop. So for I in range starting at 0, because 0 is the location of the first item at index 0 until the end of the list. So the length of the list or the end of the list. We print out the number, which is I plus 1, because we start at 0, right? So 0 plus 1 is 1. That's why we increment by 1. And then we just print out the item in the list. And as you can see, both ways print out the same results. Now we're on to functions in Python. So a function is really like a math function. Let's say you want to calculate the hypotenuse. If you guys still remember in high school, you learned the formula a squared plus b squared is c squared, right? So let's say we want to calculate the hypotenuse, that would be c squared. So you need to take the square root on both sides, and then you will have this one. So let me copy this to the power of 0.5 or the square root. And this would be equal to c. In the function calculate hypotenuse, we're going to take input a and b, and then using these inputs, we calculate the hypotenuse. Now let's try to use the function. So while true just means repeat and run forever, We're going to get input a and then input b, and then we calculate the hypotenuse, and then we repeat. A, let's say 3, b is 4, the hypotenuse is 5. Now let's try 30 and 40. It's gonna be 50. Now let's try 70, 87 and 93, 90. It's gonna print out this. And this program is gonna go on forever, so the way to stop it is you do Control C and it's going to stop. And CLS just means clear the screen. The next topic that we're going to talk about is the Fibonacci sequence. And let me plug in my pen. So the Fibonacci sequence is a very special sequence because it's very famous, and it starts out at 0, and then we have 1, then you have 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. And the way this works is that every number is the sum of the two last numbers before it, and that's how you get this number. Now let's say you want to write a program to calculate the 7th Fibonacci number. The first thing you would do is write out the indexes. And then you always start with 0 and 1. So it's basically a list that you start out. Then you're going to open this list. You're going to take the last two numbers in the list. So 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 8, and 13. And then close the list. And then you're going to get the last number inside this list, which is 13, right? So the 7th Fibonacci number is the number 13. So here we start out with the list, and then we use the for loop. We get the last two numbers, we add them together, and we put it back into the list. And then at the end, we just take the last number and return it. And as you can see, not only is it calculating the 8th Fibonacci number, it's also recording it in a list. And this technique is called memoization. And it's very useful because you can reuse this list in the future. And you can also store it somewhere. So since this one is a little bit complicated, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to try. Okay, now let's move on to the very last topic of today, and that's going to be selection sort. The way selection sort works is, let's say you have a list of numbers 5, 3, 4, 1, 2, and you want to sort this so that it goes from least to greatest. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let me demonstrate how this works. The first thing you're going to do is put indexes onto the list, just like last time. It helps you keep track a lot easier. And selection sort, the idea behind it is it's kind of like a multiplayer game. So you have two players, you have player A, then you have player B on the right. And then the idea is to find the smallest number in the list. So we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to assume 5 is the smallest number. And I know it's not the smallest number, but let's just pretend for now. B is going to look at 3. And yes, 3 is smaller than 5. So now we say that this is the smallest number. Then B moves to the right. B looks at 4. 4 isn't smaller than 3. So B moves on. 1 is smaller than 3. So this becomes the new smallest number. Two is not smaller than 1. So B goes through the list and finds that 1 is the smallest number. So we swap 1 with 5, with where A is at. We swapped it. And as you can see, the smallest number is now at the beginning. It's like magic, right? And 1 is in its correct place now. We repeat the process, and this time we're going to put A on the second number. And B goes here. So we assume 3 is the smallest number. B looks at 4. 4 is bigger, right? So we ignore it. We're going to move on. 5 is bigger than 3, so we move on. 2 is smaller than 3, so we assume that that's the new small number. And since B is at the end of the list, we found the smallest number, and we're going to swap with the number that A is at, which is number 3. So 5 is larger than 4. 3 is smaller than 4, so 3 becomes the small number. So B went through the array, and we're going to swap 3 and 4. And we're almost done. So now B looks at 4, and 4 is indeed smaller than 5. So B went through the array, and we're going to swap 4 with 5. And this completes selection sort. So the common mistake that people make is they actually put A on the last element of the list. And this is a mistake because when you put B, it's going to be outside. And this is where your program's going to crash, because B is outside the list. You get an index out of bounds. So to sum up, we start A here. A is going to go until the second last number. And B will go to the last number. And B is always next to A. Let's take a look at the code. We're going to put A on the first number in the list. It's going to go to length minus 1. This is basically the second last number. That's the syntax for it. Wherever A is at, we're going to assume that's the smallest number, right? We're recording the index of the smallest number. And then we put B next to A. So A plus 1 just means B is to the right of A, next to A, and then B is going to go to the end of the list. And if, let's say, if the number that B is at is smaller than the smallest number, right, then that has to be the new small number. So after this for loop, B is at the end of the array, and we swap the smallest number with the number that A is at. So this is the syntax for swapping the numbers. And so let's run this program. Again. So as you can see, the before it's not sorted, but afterwards it is sorted. So that's basically it for today. If you guys want to learn insertion sort, bubble sort, merge sort, and quick sort, I also have the code for that. So just go ahead and email me here. And I also include the explanation of them. And now is the time for questions. So feel free to turn on your mic and ask me questions. Or if you guys don't have any questions, then this is it. This is the end of the workshop. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for coming. Yep. For the code, just email me. Oh yeah, sure. So right here. And this is not the only way to sort. There's also insertion sort, which is similar, and it's a bit faster than selection sort. There's also bubble sort, quick sort, and merge sort as well. So if you're taking ITI 1120, this will definitely be on the exam. I might, I might. But if you want to get a code right now tonight, then you should email me here. Yep, no worries. Have a nice day.